Now, if you've been in my event, you've seen I've posted a lot of questions as to whether males or females do certain things more. And one of the things I mentioned is there are some things that men do more because they tie into the fact that men need to be respected and need to feel respected for them to be able to function well. So certain things, that idea of being respected can tie into the idea of conquering, dominance, that type of thing. And I'm not talking about in extreme macho ways necessarily. I'm meaning just in general, they want to feel accomplished. They want to be successful. They want to feel like they're able to achieve. And so there's some things that come along with that style of communication. Whereas with us as women, we tend to focus more on being loved. Now, both men and women want the other thing as well. I want my husband to respect me as well. But if I had to pick between love and respect, I'd take love every time. Same thing for my husband. If he had to pick between love and respect, he would pick respect every time. So I'm just going to focus on listening, since that's one of the major areas. Men tend to listen for the purpose of repairing. That is, fixing whatever the problem is that's being discussed. So because they listen for the purpose of repairing, they tend to do a number of things. First of all, they're going to talk more in mixed groups with men and women together, especially if it's about a problem. Now, that was a question I had asked in my group, and in every case, people said, oh, women talk more, women talk more. Well, that's actually not true. We get the impression that women talk more because when women are together, they talk a lot. And we as women do self-disclose more and share our problems more. But if we're in especially a group with men and women, research studies have shown that men actually talk more. It's part of that kind of dominance thing, wanting to be respected. One-on-one, if it's my husband and I together, it kind of depends. If I'm talking about my day, I might talk more. But if we're talking about a problem, the chances are he's going to talk more. And it's because he's going to start trying to fix whatever the problem is that we're discussing. That idea of repairing also leads men to interrupt conversations more. There was one study that was done, and they found that when men and women were communicating together, 97% of the interruptions that occurred were men interrupting women. So if you're a female and your husband interrupts you a lot, you're not alone. And it's because of that idea of repairing the situation. So this is what typically happens. A woman goes to her husband to talk about a problem. As soon as he feels like he has enough information that he can give a solution to the problem, he will interrupt her and give her the solution. Now, that's how his brain works, okay? I, as a female, often will talk through my problems as a way of figuring out my own solution. So the way to overcome this is that when I go to my husband and I don't want a solution, I just want him to listen and empathize with me, I tell him what I want. Now, that may seem silly, but if I don't, I end up frustrated and he doesn't understand why I'm frustrated. So I say to him, honey, I'm going to tell you about a problem I'm having, and I don't want you to fix the problem. I just want you to listen and relate to me. And he'll do it. He'll listen to me. He won't interrupt me. He will pay attention. And he will, when I'm done speaking, say, honey, I'm really sorry you're going through that. I know that must be frustrating. And that's all I want, because I like to fix some of my own problems. I don't need to have my husband fix all my problems. Now, there are times that I do want help fixing a problem. And in that case, I don't give him any caveat as to the conversation, because I know he's going to automatically default to fixing the problem. Now, even if we're discussing a problem, I may want to have him hear me out for all of the aspects of the problem that maybe he won't be patient to do. So if I'm talking about something and he interrupts me, and starts to fix the problem, I may say, please wait a minute. I know you think you have the solution, and it may be the solution, but I need to give you more information, so please let me finish. Okay? If I don't do that, he may not give me the best solution, or I'm still going to end up frustrated because he hasn't listened to me. And this may be painful for you to hear if you're a person who interrupts somebody a lot, but I'm going to tell you the truth. When you interrupt people, you're basically being selfish. What you're doing is saying that what I have to say is more important than my listening to you. And that can often create conflict for a number of reasons. Number one, you end up hurting people's feelings because even if you don't intend to communicate that, you do. You say, what I have to say is more important than you. That's what your interruption communicates. Secondly, you might not hear the person out. So you might not have all the information to give a good solution or to understand the situation. And thirdly, you might cut the person off, and because you haven't heard them out, you might assume they meant something that they didn't mean, and that can create conflict. So you take a certain amount of information and react to it in a certain way, interpreting it in a negative way, let's say, whereas if you had simply listened to the person fully, then you would have understood and it would not never have turned into a conflict. Okay? Now, so that's men. Men also tend to switch topics in conversation more. And that's because, again, they want to control the flow of conversation and turn it to topics that they want to talk about. And men offer advice more, which I've already said that has to do with fixing the problem. Now, for us as women, we listen for the purpose of relating. Because our primary need is love, we are all about relationships and building relationships. So when I'm listening to someone, I'm listening for how I can connect with that person. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to hear, 2 hours of emotional expression, okay? But it's through talking and listening that we as women feel connected to other people in relationships. Now, because of that, many women will explain too much, give too many details, and it can be hard for a man especially to pay attention, because remember, he's focused on what do I need to fix this problem? And he's getting all this extra information that he doesn't need to fix the problem. Okay. So as a man, there's a couple things you can do. If your spouse or a female, any other female in your life happens to communicate where they give all these details, maybe they get off track and they get on bunny trails and you start getting lost as to what even is being talked about, rather than cutting them off and interrupting them and being selfish, you should focus more on what they're saying and participate more in the conversation. Okay? Demonstrate that you're listening by what are called back channel cues. Things like, oh, really? Now, interestingly, that same study I mentioned that talked about interruptions said that men also had more what are called delayed minimal responses. So those little responses of, is that right? Those responses were there, but they were late. So at the point where that response should usually come when I pause, my husband was doing it at a different time, which clearly communicates he's not really listening. He just knows he needs to say something. Okay. So really listen. If the person matters to you, put aside your own thoughts, your own desire to fix, your own desire to, have her think you're so great because you fixed her problem. Focus on her because you care about her, and invest the time and energy in listening to her. Now, in addition to that, so you communicate that you're listening, you can also ask questions. So if it's somebody who's giving too many details and getting off on other subjects, you can say, okay, so you were telling me about this and what exactly happened there? So that can get a person back onto the subject and get them moving ahead with specific information so that they can get to the end of the story. So asking questions is a great way to help somebody keep a story moving along without being rude and interrupting them or saying, I don't need all the details, just tell me to ask. That's a phrase I've heard at with my husband sometimes at work, and I don't know if it's a popular phrase in the business environment, but just give me the ask. Well, that may work in business, but that's not going to work very well in a relationship, because that's going to cause hurt feelings. So hopefully this information has been helpful to you to understand how you can improve that aspect of communication